Arfield, what a bully! Scott Arfield! He's been threatening that recently, and all the Burnley players run to the Darwin end.
Burnley win the next ball. It's Rory now. On the outside, decent.
Barnes! He got it! Ashley Barnes with it! What a cross from Rory! And there was Ashley Barnes! And Burnley leading the derby.
Knocks it quickly, finds Benson in space at the byline. Can Burnley get a goal here? Back for Brownell, saved by the keeper.
Burnley won it to the end. That is magnificent. They deserve that.
On it by Paul Patella, off for a hat-trick.
He's got it. Hat-trick for Nathan Teller. Oh, he's on fire at the minute. 3-0 Burnley. It's Nathan Teller's day. And Burnley are 3 up here. Fantastic derby.
Here's Benson, can he go on the outside? Comes inside, top shot.
Oh, the goal. Manuel Benson once more. That is top class. Burnley have done it. Fantastic. Clarets deserve the championship title. They've been the best side throughout the campaign. Burnley have won the second tier. What a fantastic achievement. The players have been magnificent.
Yes, hello everyone and welcome along to the latest instalment of the Turfcast podcast pre-game show with me, Joe Redmond, ahead of Sunday's game against Norwich City down at Carrow Road. The best defence in the league against the best attack in the league. So it's going to be a very interesting matchup. I will caveat that, however, by saying Norwich's last 2 games have ended in Norwich not scoring a single goal against defences that admittedly are not as good as Burnley's, but nobody's defence is as good as Burnley's in the Championship this season. So we all are a little bit worried about Norwich's attack, but do we need to be? But to get the lowdown on Norwich, as usual, we have a fan of the opposition, or in this case, a journalist, and that is Adam from the Pinken. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, very well, thank you, mate. Yeah, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you, mate. Let's talk about Norwich City then and their season so far, because I was looking at Norwich's squad and sort of like the players that you've got. I know you've got a few injuries, and we'll talk about the sort of individuals that are injured in a few moments. But down in 10th, and I would just say, obviously, on a reverse show on your channel, that I was expecting Norwich to be higher than that. I'm a little bit surprised to see that you're down there. So is it fair to say the season's been a little bit underwhelming so far?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a strange season so far. I mean, it was one that was sort of, I suppose, packaged as a transitional season for Norwich. I mean, last season, just touching on that briefly, ended in pretty bit of disappointment in the playoff semi-final against Leeds, losing 4-0 at Ellen Road. And, of course, against a former manager in Daniel Farke, they decided to sort of switch into a completely different direction and change the sort of the route of travel almost and head with Johannes Hoff-Torup, who was appointed from Nordsjælland over in Denmark. Kind of a more definitive playing style, very attacking in terms of even possession-based football, more than what they were under David Wagner. And I think everyone knew that was going to take time, because not only was that on top, but they also had kind of changes within the coaching level. They had changes on the playing style elements as well. You know, the fact they brought in a lot of younger players from overseas, trying to sort of bring the age of the squad down. And that time to gel was going to be required. But I think they probably actually hit the straps a little bit earlier than a lot of people expected. And the form in the early sort of part of the season, okay, the initial part was a little bit slow, but certainly sort of September, October, they were grinding out wins. They were free-flowing attacking football, lots of goals. And I think the expectation and the bar maybe of Norwich fans for this season grew a little bit. And I think I was always kind of in the camp where you need to temper that a little bit, because this season could be anything really. They could ultimately get in the top 6, or it might be more where I bracket it in sort of a mid-table finish. Then they had a really bad injury crisis, which they're coming a little bit out of the other side of that now, but they sort of endured some really difficult results. I think it was 3 straight defeats one week and quite a package of draws at one stage as well, where they seemed like they just couldn't buy a win. And I think maybe that was kind of a difficult spell in their season. They then got a couple of wins quite recently at home, a 6-1 thrashing of Plymouth, a 4-2 win at home to Luton. And maybe that optimism returned again. And then kind of, I suppose, again, kind of back to the drawing board with a pretty grim defeat at Loftus Road last Saturday, 3-0. And everything that was so good about Norwich in terms of those games before, the free-flowing attacking football, was completely different in that trip to Loftus Road. They were turgid, they looked tired. And then going in, even into last night, they sort of changed their playing style and went away from what this Norwich team's all about, the identity, to just try and get a point really at Portsmouth under the lights. And they obviously, they got that that they sort of went there and that objective they achieved. But yeah, they're a very different team at home than they are away. So I suppose that makes it a little bit more interesting on Sunday.
Yeah, I think we're actually better away than we are at home at the minute. I'd say that. I think we've won 5 games both home and away. But obviously the expectation is to win more home games than away games. So you'd probably say that we are better away from home than we are at home. What's caused the drop-off in form then? Because I was just looking then when you were talking, it's 2 wins in the last 11. And that's for a team that's got ambitions of the playoffs, which outside looking in, I presume you do. I'm not sure if you actually do. That's not great form, is it? And you said there you had a better start at the start of the season. I think you won 3 out of your first 4. So what caused that drop-off in form? Is it the injuries that you've mentioned?
Yeah, I think that's probably the key factor. When you take the spine out of any team, you kind of look at Man City at the moment and what they're sort of suffering. You take all your best players out of that sort of central area, and it can become quite difficult. Norwich lost Angus Gunn, who's, of course, their first choice goalkeeper and one of the better goalkeepers probably in the Championship. And George Long, our second choice, is just unfortunately nowhere near the levels of Angus Gunn. You take out the midfield, they lost Marcelino Nunez, who's having a really good season. They lost Kenny McLean to suspension, which unfortunately is another one that they've sort of had to endure in the last sort of 24 hours, which I'm sure I'll touch upon ahead of this game. They lost Anis Ben Slimani, who they brought in on loan from Sheffield United for quite a period, who started the season pretty well. Josh Sargent obviously is the key one. He went out with 3. That would have been sort of fairly, mid-October time, and he's out until the new year. And anyone who knows Josh Sargent in the Championship, he's a goal scorer at this level. And you take that out of your team, and you've then got a young lad in Ante Cianac, who they brought in from the Polish top flight. He's a Croatian under 21. He needs time to adapt. He's a very different striker as well to Sargent, and the way they're trying to play, it's for him. It's again just trying to gel into this team and different players, different language, different culture, just so many different factors that come into play. And you strip all that back, and that's really the reason. Because I just think in terms of the players, they were still trying to play the same way. I think had they've had those players available, it could have been very different. But you can deal with losing one player, but what you can't deal with is losing 5, 6, 7 key players all at the same time. And unfortunately, as is the case with the Championship, unfortunately, maybe more than the Premier League, when you lose all your key players, unfortunately, the drop-off and the players available underneath are just not quite up to the same level.
Yeah, no, that's totally understandable. And again, you're kind of like preaching to the choir with that one. Our injury crisis isn't as bad as yours, I'd say. But, we have had quite a lot of injuries. We touched on it on your show. Lau Foster's out. Aaron Ramsey's out, but he's not been in at any point. Same with Nathan Redmond. You got Mike Trezor, who is missing in action, doesn't want to play for us, in my humble opinion. I think that's pretty obvious. And then CJ Egan-Riley as well has missed the last couple of games, but fingers crossed he might be back for the weekend. But like I said, at this stage, we're recording this on Wednesday. The press conference is likely to be either tomorrow or Friday for Scott Parker, with it being a Sunday game, so we'll find out. But from what I was told when CJ was injured, it wasn't that bad, and he should be back for this game. So fingers crossed he is. I mentioned it there in passing briefly about your ambitions for the season should be getting into the top 6, and I think they should be with the squad that you've got. Are there your ambitions for the season? Is it top 6, and have they had to sort of like take a rethink recently with the run of form and the injuries?
Yeah, I sort of mentioned at the start, I think it's a mixture. Some fans probably feel this squad and the individuals within this squad, if fully available, and all of them are available for every game this season, I think top 6 is more than an achievable objective for this group and this club at the moment. But the difficulty is, unfortunately, the drop-off in quality. As I mentioned, the fact you've got so many younger players coming in that are trying to adapt to a new league and a new playing style. And a lot of things have changed at the football club. I mean, the ownership's changed. The sporting director's changed within the last year. Change of manager, change of coaches, so many different players. Unfortunately, that all takes time to bed in, and a completely different playing style, different identity. So I think a lot of fans have maybe recognised that this could be a transitional season for Norwich, and mid-table is probably more of a realistic objective at this moment in time. But I mean, even the assistant coach, we spoke to him on our channels in the summertime, and he said the first year, if we sort of get in the top 6 and we push towards the Premier League, then that's fine, that's great. Second season, we sort of have to be in and around that conversation, and if the third season we're not in that area and we're not promoted, then we failed. So it's kind of this plan almost in place, I think, at the moment within this football club, that within the next 3 years they want to be in the Premier League. But if it's not this season, I think next season will have a lot more onus and a lot more pressure on it more than this campaign, because I think there's a lot of fans willing to give it time, willing to be patient, and they just want to see a club that's moving forwards with an identity, a clear plan, a clear structure. And I think they're starting to see the sort of fundamentals of that now on the pitch, but it's just about consistency at the moment. And that's kind of, alludes to the results you mentioned there. They're not quite consistent enough, and injuries and the drop-off in quality of players is something that they need to address, because unfortunately, I think, when you kind of in those situations again, you can't really be mitigating again for those sort of poor runs of form that they had to endure there sort of in November, because that is going to be the difference in future seasons, maybe between trying to get in the top 2 or the top 6 and eventually falling away. So, yeah, I can see them getting top 6, but they need Josh Sargent back. They need signs to stay in January, and just so many other factors to go in their way. And at the moment, it feels like a few of them are sort of veering on the other direction, and it'll be more of a mid-table finish for Norwich.
Yeah, I guess time will tell. I do think, again, once you've got your injuries back, I think you'll start to find the form that you had earlier in the season as well. But like I said, time will tell. We've alluded to it already. Best attack in the league. I'll just quickly get the league table up on my screen now. 35 goals you've scored so far. Middlesbrough, they're just a little bit behind you on 34, even though you've not scored in your last 2. Obviously, Middlesbrough have only scored 2 in that period. So they've caught you slightly, but not been able to overtake you. Why have you got the best attack in the league? Like, is it the style of play? Is it the players? Or is it just the brilliant finishing of a player you just mentioned in Signs?
It's kind of a mixture of all that, really. They've got two of probably the better or best attacking players in the Championship. I mean, Borja Signs, anybody who's watched Norwich this season, he's the key man. He can score from anywhere. And it's not really a fluke at this point. I mean, at one stage where his goal scoring record at the start of the season was sort of being brought into the conversation, everyone's saying, can he maintain it? Will he be consistent throughout this season? He's continuing to prove himself that he is not going to stop. I mean, okay, he's not scored in the last couple of games, but again, I think, Norwich have not performed to their levels in the last couple of games, but 2 hat-tricks already this season. There's interest from the Premier League. There's going to be interest from La Liga. It's going to be about whether Norwich can keep hold of him in January, because it's inevitable there's going to be loads of bids coming his way. But he's just a great player to watch. I mean, we've kind of had a few of those down the years. Emi Buendia for Norwich in the Championship, was far too good for the level. James Maddison was far too good for the level. And he's kind of in that caliber of player now who's just stepping up and consistently scoring goals. I want to see a little bit more of creative output in terms of assists from him. I think it's just 2 so far this season. So as much as his goals have been great, there are still other elements of his game that he needs to improve on, even the defensive side of the game. I know he's an attacking player, but obviously they need to do the tracking back and help you sort of defender in behind you, and that's still elements of his game that will grow, because he's still quite a young man. Obviously you've got Josh Sargent as well, who, as I mentioned, has been out for quite a while, but at this level, you've got to look at his record from last season, even the season before in the Championship, gradually starting to prove that he's probably the most rounded number 9 in the league in terms of just every ability he's generally pretty good at. I mean, there's lots of other strikers that are better at sort of fundamentals within the game, so somebody might be better at heading than he is, but as a package, I think he's probably up there in terms of just being a complete striker, complete number 9, which are quite rare in the game these days, as you sort of see across world football. A lot of people play with false 9s, or they play with almost wingers in a sort of striker role. But he's the catalyst for Norwich and why they got in the top 6 last season, because when he returned, his goals were propelling them up the league, and they miss him badly at the moment, because he even does that defensive work from the front, really, the way he presses the defenders and harries them, and how, he's just a really good player at this level. And they're sort of the 2 goal scorers, really. But it's all about the system as well that he's got in play. It's very much 4-3-3, possession-based football, but it's possession-based football to play attacking football. There's a lot of managers now that place an emphasis on attack, possession-based football, almost Russell Martin at Southampton, but it's almost starvation of the ball. They don't actually do a lot with it. This Norwich team is literally bred to score goals and be attacking, and that's why they're scoring so many goals. I mean, they scored 10 goals in the last 2 home games, so they are the entertainers in this league. They concede a lot of goals, but they'll score a lot. So I enjoy that football, so long may it continue.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm sat here talking about how you've not scored in your last 2, but yeah, that's a great stat, scoring 10 in your last 2 home games, which obviously the 2 games before that, 4-2 against Luton and 6-1 against Plymouth. So yeah, that does scare me a little. So thank you for that. I do want to talk about Ashley Barnes as well. Obviously, Burnley legend. The word legend is thrown about too much these days, but I think if you could choose pretty much anybody currently playing football who's still a legend at Burnley, I think Ashley Barnes would be up there. Tom Heaton's probably the only one that can also sort of like be an ilk. Ben Mee as well, actually. I completely forgot about Ben Mee, weirdly enough. But yeah, we love him down at Burnley, and it's going to be so bizarre to see Ashley Barnes play against us. In a completely selfish way, I was kind of hoping that he wouldn't play. Maybe he'd pick up a slight niggle, and just miss one game. Because I don't want to see Barnsley get injured. But I don't want to see him play against us. Not because I'm scared that he'll score against us. I mean, if he does, that will hurt loads. Could you imagine if he scored against us and he like proper celebrated? That would break my heart. But yeah, I love Barnsley, and it's going to be so bizarre seeing him play against us, mainly because of the way he plays. He's not just going to be playing a game of football against us. Every Burnley fan loved him for how he played on the edge, getting in defenders' faces, throwing himself to the floor. And that's going to frustrate us as Burnley fans. But at the same time, we're going to be thinking, it's Barnes there. It might end up at some point, I might end up shouting at him, like, what are you doing? Or, something like that. And I can't bring myself. I love the man. I absolutely love the man. But yeah, what are Norwich fans' thoughts on Ashley Barnes? How's he done since he's moved to Carroll Road?
Yeah, he's a bit of a Marmite player, I'd say, amongst the fan base. He started quite well, obviously arrived, I think, with a lot of expectation, a lot of hope, obviously playing more in that false nine side that was so successful for Burnley. With company, obviously, the two wide men, the way he linked up with those and just put everything on a plate for them. I think Norwich kind of hoped that that's what he'd bring to this team. And he started the season quite well, actually, under David Wagner, playing more in the sort of number 10 role, sort of deep line striker behind Josh Sargent. And those two seem to strike up quite a good relationship. And you speak to Sargent or Barnes, and both of them mention that they're quite close in terms of a friendship and a relationship with each other. And you could see that starting to blossom, actually, in the early stages of last season. Then, unfortunately, they both got injured. Sargent more for sort of, it was about 5-6 months, quite a bad injury at Huddersfield. Barnes then got an injury against Leicester and was out for sort of 2 or 3 months. And unfortunately, the sort of came back in around the January and just wasn't quite the same player in the second half of the season. Then suffered another injury, played the second leg of the playoff semi-final at Ellen Road, and he just didn't look fit. And unfortunately, I think that probably didn't help his situation, because at the start of this season, again, was out with injury. He's only really just come back into the fold within the last couple of games. And I think we all were a little bit intrigued to see how he gets on in this Torp system, because it is quite similar, I'd say, to Company and the way he wanted to play. And we thought if he could maybe play that false nine role, given you've got Borja Sainz, as I mentioned, the likes of Onel Hernandez, who are good attacking wingers that do have a little bit more of an output in terms of goals, particularly Sainz. Maybe there could be, potentially a good sort of something they could sort of link onto there, I suppose, and something that could be fruitful moving forwards. But yeah, I don't know. Last night, again, looked a little bit leggy. I just wonder whether that sort of the strengths of his game have started to, just that physicality is still there, but maybe just even bringing the ball in and sort of trying to link the play, not quite at the sort of same level as it was even when he arrived at Norwich. There was a few sort of opportunities last night where the ball got pumped into him and it sort of just bounced off him, where I think in previous years, and you see it in those Burnley teams that were so successful, he had that about him, because he's never really been an out-and-out goal scorer in terms of a striker. Obviously, he provides you some big goals and some big moments, but he's not your sort of 25 goal a season striker. So you need to have those other strengths in your game. And unfortunately, I think a few of them are starting to dwindle, and I saw a little bit of frustration aimed at him again last night, which is a shame to see, because I think he's a good player. And as you mentioned on our channel, I've had the pleasure of dealing with him a little bit in my job, and he's a top man. And he says it how it is. I mean, even last season, he called a lot of the media into a meeting around the sort of March time where Norwich really needed a push to try and get in the playoffs. And he said, look, we need no criticism. Everybody needs to be on board. Can you get this through to the fans? And everyone bought into it. And he was sort of a key catalyst and almost a cultural architect, I'd say, within this club, because he is the sort of person who's a leader. He's going to set the sort of precedent for the players, the younger players. He helps those develop as well. So there's lots of still benefits to him. But I think when his contract runs out at the end of the season, unfortunately, I don't see Norwich renewing it.
Yeah, that is a shame to hear, to be fair. I've not tuned into Norwich too much this season or paid too much attention, but I remember watching Barnsley a couple of times last season and seeing some things online from sort of like Norwich creators and Norwich fans and stuff like that. And a lot of it was positive towards Ash. So I am a bit disappointed to hear that it seems to have dwindled, because he is a legend. But to be fair, some Burnley fans have recently criticised the decision to let him go and said we should have probably let Jay Rodriguez go rather than Ashley Barnes. I'm not going to get into that debate now, but it just goes to show how highly thought of he is. He was here and still is here. But yeah, it's going to be very, very strange to see him play against us this weekend. But yeah, moving on, not to throw you under the bus or anything, but I always like to get the fans' opinions on Burnley as a team and how they are sort of like this season and things like that, and any players that you think might hurt Norwich this weekend.
Yeah, I've sort of seen bits of Burnley, I suppose, on the TV this season, quite different maybe to Burnley teams under company. Obviously, that championship season where, I mean, I remember you guys coming to Carrow Road, I think it was 3-0, you beat us. And
yeah, it was
one of the better teams I've seen probably in recent times, just the style of play, the attacking players, Rory and Benson and, Barnes, the way they're all linking up. And it was all just very free-flowing, felt very fluid. But obviously, the bits I've seen this season from Burnley, as is kind of the case with Scott Parker as a manager, a bit more defensive-minded, defence first over attack. And, in terms of a way forward and getting out of the Championship, he's clearly got a good track record of doing it. He's done it at Fulham, he's done it at Bournemouth, and he's a manager I think Norwich have been linked with it in different times. But our fan base have kind of been used to very attacking football, very fluid. So hence why the likes of Dean Smith and David Wagner in recent times haven't really gone down well with the fans, and there's never been that quite same connection, I suppose, because their styles of football are maybe a little bit more wedded to Parker in terms of defence first. And I suppose if it works and it gets you out of this division and it helps you try and get back to the Premier League, and then maybe you look to try and shift in a different direction if you want to at that point, then that's obviously the way to go, because we all know financially the Premier League's the place to be, and it's the way forward for both of these clubs, Norwich and Burnley. But I think there's a lot of threats, and I'm wary of it because, as you sort of said, you've got the best away record, we've got a pretty good home record. Defensively, you're the best in the league. We're up there with the top goal scorers. So it's all kind of got the different metrics and stats around it. Something's got to give. It's either going to be a tight, cagey 0-0 game, or it's going to be a thriller that Norwich somehow managed to get something out of Burnley and they start scoring goals and it's going to be 3-3. But intrigued to see. There's still lots of good players, obviously, in that Burnley camp. I've always been a big fan of Josh Cullen in the midfield from that title-winning season. Just think he's a player that goes a little bit under the radar when you speak about sort of best players in the Championship. He's not someone that most people will go to, but I suppose maybe delving a little bit more into statistics and watching teams a little bit more in detail, I think I can appreciate what he brings to the team, just in that midfield, the dynamism, the kind of a way he can help sort of almost grab the game sort of by the sort of scruff of the neck and get players over the line and get those results over the line. And when he performs well, I think Burnley perform well. So very wary of his threats. Defensively, obviously, I know you're very strong. There's lots of kind of intriguing elements, but I think it's going to be a game that could go either way.
Yeah, completely agree. I couldn't even tell you how it's like, what type of game we're going to have. Are we going to have a cagey game that finishes low scoring, which the majority of Burnley games have so far this season? I think, I don't know what it is exactly, the stats, but I bet you it's more than 15 Burnley games this season have finished under 2.5 goals. But I would suggest Norwich's is probably a bit flipped the other way. So it's going to be interesting at what type of game we have. Speaking of Norwich, is there any Norwich City players that Burnley fans should be looking out for? Any players that you think can hurt the best defence in the league?
Obviously, there's the obvious ones I've already mentioned, but I mean, to sort of go, I suppose, away and maybe pick someone out that's maybe not in the headlights or headlines quite so much. Marcelino Nunez in midfield's had a pretty positive season, come back from injury in recent weeks. He sort of arrived, 2 or 3 years ago now, and he started really well under Dean Smith, and then had a couple of seasons where he just didn't quite hit the same levels. But in this system, he's just about the pitch everywhere. He's a terrier in midfield. He's really good defensively. He can win the ball back for such a sort of small play. You think, okay, he's not got that sort of skill set, but he definitely has. Very tenacious, good on the ball, can pick a pass from everywhere. And he sort of helps Norwich tick because he's always looking on the half turn to get Norwich forward. He's never someone who's passing it backwards. He's always looking forward. And I think that's something that they missed, certainly when his absence in recent games. They are probably also missing one of their key men on Sunday, in Kenny McLean, who, weirdly enough, at QPR, there was an incident which never got picked up by the referees, never got picked up by anybody in the media, the managers, anything. It was a flailing arm against one of the young lads for QPR. And weirdly enough, yesterday afternoon at 3 p.m, ahead of the game, Kenny McLean's got a 4-match suspension because the referees at the PG MOL have decided to review that bit of a mouthful. Have decided to review this incident and given him a 4-game suspension off the back of it, which I've watched it back now on probably 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And I really, for the life of me, cannot understand how they've come to that conclusion. Who's picked it up within the FA and decided to go down that route, because it's never a red card in game, and it's certainly not a 4-game suspension off the back of it, because I've never seen it really before. I think there's been a few incidents this season, the likes of Osmajic for Preston, where he sort of bit the Blackburn player, and obviously that's rightfully been reviewed, and he's got the punishment that he deserves. But in this scenario, he's not even caught the man. There's no intent. He's just tried to block the run, and because he's already had a red card this season, and one of those was because he said a few foul things to the referee, they've decided to upgrade it from 3 games to 4. So we're missing him, and he's such a crucial player for Norwich again in the midfield. He's that leader. He's been around Norwich for since 2017 now. He's a Scottish international, knows the Championship inside and out, and he helps Norwich tick as well. So missing him on Sunday, and Josh Sargent, doesn't lead to quite so much confidence as maybe if those two were available.
Yeah, and to be fair, it does fill us with a little bit more confidence with these sort of players missing. But it's interesting. I can't comment on the incident myself. I was completely unaware of it. Didn't even hear about it. But yeah, you say that you can't understand how it's been picked up. Maybe there's an Ipswich fan working at the PGMOL, because it does sound a little bit strange, to be fair, just based on that. But I'll have to give it a look after we finish recording this. Right, let's get into what type of game you're expecting then, please, mate. And then same as what I did on your channel, if you can give a prediction at the end of it, please, mate.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a game of technical players. And in some ways, I know you said on our channel that it's probably a game that's going to suit Burnley. But weirdly enough, I think this is a sort of game that suits Norwich. They've suffered a little bit, certainly in recent games, away at QPR and at Portsmouth, because they're both a little bit more direct. They're both kind of more physical in terms of the way they play, and maybe not quite so willing to have the ball on the floor. Norwich just want to play pure possession attacking football at home, which is kind of their fortress. That's where they're strong, and they can play their best football. They're a little bit more expansive. They go, and they almost play that sort of Hoff-ball is what it's branded, Carrow Road. Certainly do that more at home than they do away. So in that element, I think this game might suit Norwich more than those recent couple of away games. So intrigued to see how they approach it. Do they go back to kind of that sort of style and identity that's worked so well for them, or does he try and stick with what he sort of tried to do, I suppose, at Portsmouth, and went a little bit more direct and went away from kind of his principles, which didn't go down very well with the fans? It's not something I hope they do moving forwards, but they're very different side at home, they are away, and for those reasons I can see it being a sort of game where Norwich maybe tried to pull Burnley into their sort of way of playing, more of an attacking game, more expansive, more goals, and maybe Burnley won't keep a clean sheet on Sunday. So for those reasons, let's go for a Desmond 2-2, which I think Norwich would probably be relatively happy with, given Burnley's position. And they've kind of had a relative theme, I suppose, of draws at home against the sides in and around the top 6, which, of course, then if you can back it up by beating teams lower down in the table, might be a recipe to try and get in the top 6. So I think most Norwich fans would be content with a point. Yeah,
it's interesting because I think pretty much the exact opposite. I think Burnley obviously going to try and keep the game tight. They're going to keep it cagey. And again, it's probably because I'm a Burnley fan. I've watched Burnley all season, whereas obviously you're watching Norwich all season, that you'll think it's going to go that way, whereas I think it's going to go more in the Burnley way. I agree, though. I think this is going to suit Burnley better than our last couple of home games, because Norwich aren't going to shut up shop. So there's going to be space in behind. I actually do think we'll concede because your strike force and your forward play is so good. Or do I? I'm not sure. It's difficult to predict, I've just said 1-0 on your channel, and I was just going to say 2-1 on this channel then, but I've kind of like convinced myself midway through talking that maybe you'll score against us, but I'll stick with my earlier prediction of 1-0, but I won't be surprised, obviously, to see you guys get a goal. I think if you had McLean, if you had all the rest of them, Sargent being the main one as well, and things like that, then yeah, we might be in for a tougher afternoon. But just for consistency, because I've said 1-0, sorry, on your channel, I'll go with 1-0 again now, even though I was just going to say 2-1. But I might change my mind before I do a TikTok preview, which I tend to do on like Thursdays and Fridays these days now. Like I just said on your channel, I don't know who I think I am trying to do TikTok these days. I'm far too old for TikTok. I'm actually older than Ashley Barnes. I know I don't look it, mainly because he looks a bit older than what he does. But yeah, I don't know who I think I am trying to do TikToks. But yeah, for me, I'm going to go for a Burnley win. And I know some Burnley fans at the minute are very negative and very, I'm going to say miserable, but that's a harsh word, very moody at the minute because our most recent result. But I do feel that Norwich playing in a certain way will play into our hands. Look at the Leeds game, for example. I think against these sort of teams, we can be dogged, we can be determined, and we can come out with a win. Fingers crossed, obviously, although I'm sure you will disagree, mate. But yeah, we'll wrap it up there. But obviously, before I do you want to let people know where they can find you and any Norwich City content that they might want to digest before or after the game?
Yeah, so we're the Pink 'Un, which is sort of the sports arm of the Eastern Daily Press and Norwich Evening News, the sort of local newspapers down here in Norwich. A lot of it these days kind of is, as is the way of life in this century, is more digital. So you can find us at www.pinkun.com. There's all the kind of articles around the game, pre-match and post-match. We're on YouTube as well. We've kind of do all the pre-match build-up stuff. We speak to the managers, so the press comments will be up there on Friday. So any Burnley fans might want to go give that a watch and see what players will be available, who will be missing, what sort of direction that Trot sees this game going on Sunday afternoon now. And of course, we'll have all the sort of coverage post-match as well. So all the sort of reaction from the managers and all that good stuff on our YouTube channel. We also have the podcast as well, available on all the sort of usual podcast providers. We record that after every game. So well worth checking that out. And I suppose particularly in this game and this scenario, to see our thoughts on what hopefully will be a good game between us two on Sunday, and obviously at Pink 'Un on most socials. So you can go and find us over on all those places.
Yeah, I definitely do recommend it. What I would like to say is I do feel like the Pink 'Un is probably one of the best local sports newspapers in the country, especially for a club that at the minute isn't in the Premier League. I do wish that our local papers would be a little bit more like yourselves and do a lot more digital stuff. I feel like that is where our local press does let itself down, if I'm being honest. But I'm not going to get into that debate now and end up criticising anybody online. But I just wish that people have been more like what the Pink 'Un do. I do think it's a really, really good newspaper. And yeah, you should be proud of yourselves. But yeah, thank you, Adam, for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure. I always do like to say good luck for the rest of the season, but of course after Sunday, mate.
Yeah, no, same goes for you guys. Yeah, I always enjoy the games between Norwich and Burnley. So let's hope for another good one on Sunday.